Test.
Recording in progress.
Testing. Right. Good evening. We'd like to welcome everyone to our school board meeting. This is our regular meeting. We meet the first and third Tuesday of each month. Today is Tuesday, February 6th. Board members present in the boardroom. We have members Lessons, Jacobs, Holloman, Higgins, Donnelly, and Bellamy. Joining us online is member Wilson. In addition, we have our student representative, Joshua Pack. We have our superintendent, and we have America Sullivan, our executive assistant. And with that, Josh, if you will lead us into the pledge, followed by the land acknowledgement.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Acknowledge that we gather here today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina people of the Upper Cook Inlet. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina people have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. ASD is committed to diversity and inclusion, and it is with honor and respect that we recognize all Indigenous people who live and learn in our community.
Thank you, Joshua. Next, I'd like to just welcome everyone again to our meeting, and thank you for attending and for supporting the work of the Anchorage School District and the work of this board. We would like to thank our parents, of course, our students, teachers, staff, school business partners, and the entire community for your investment in our district with your time, your talents, and your tax dollars. That brings us to item A3, which is the approval of the agenda.
Madam President, I move to approve the agenda as written.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Moved and second to approve the agenda as presented. Is there any opposition to approving the agenda as presented? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. And that brings us to our reports. We have one report tonight, and that's our student report. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Pack.
Madam President, well, I'm certainly glad to be back home, albeit the cold. I mean, I appreciate everyone for being on there during this pretty cold spell. But as far as my reports, I think I'll add on a little bit from my last report in Indianapolis. We established a group that are working to tackle the most important issues pressing within the students of America. And like I said, that's substance abuse, mental health, and we kind of grouped that together. We included cultural development, which is a very broad term, and we also included some better representation within the NFHS, which is the group that is affiliated with the NFHS network, which is whenever you pop up like a sports game in Alaska and Anchorage, they are the ones who are hosting that. So they're in charge of a lot of sports and activities across America. So I'm glad to represent Alaska, but more importantly, Anchorage in that area. And our next student advisory board meeting is February 13th. So next Tuesday, it will be from 11:15 a.m. to 1:15 p.m. On the agenda, we do not have any resolutions this time from last time having 4, but we have included a legislative discussion. So we have about 3 or 4 bills, both in the House and Senate, that we're looking at from the legislative session, that including Senate Bill 140. We think 247 is also an important bill, and perhaps 173, which is dealing with teachers having the ability to carry handguns. So those are pretty, I'd say, heavy bills that SAD and students from Anchorage are going to discuss, and I'll probably bring a report about that. But this is like the first time we're doing such a thing, and we'll also have the students who are flying to Juneau, the legislative fly-in, to also give the reports and update. And finally, I attended the community convening, or the tactic teams, for the Academies of Anchorage today, and I was part of the student voice meeting. And I think we had a very productive conversation about how we'll incorporate student voice moving on in the district to not just the Academies of Anchorage model, but things including like policies. I think I heard that the weighted grades resolution is getting ended around the administration, which I'm very thoroughly happy to see. So that's a lot of hope. And that concludes my report.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Peck. Are there any questions for our student representative? Member Lessons.
Not a question, but just a comment that I'm looking forward to being with President Bellamy, Miss Lewis, thank you. I was searching for the last name. And for their students over that fly-in weekend. They're coming back late Monday night. And so I'm sure they'll be eager to share results of their trip and their time in Juneau with all of them. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely. We're gonna miss you though. Just saying. Any other questions or comments for our student representative? All right. Thank you, Joshua. Well, Mr. Peck, I need to be consistent. All right, so that brings us to item C1 on the agenda. Dr. Bryant?
Thank you, Madam President. So today we'll provide our technical report on reading proficiency. Our full conversation will happen at our next board meeting. So next slide, please. So you'll see on this slide that the goal is listed, as well as interim goal 1.1. Which measures K1 students at or above benchmark on M-class. Next slide. You'll see on this slide, we show progress to date on interim goal 1.1. There's a dotted line there that represents the goal target between now and 2028. And this chart allows us to see progress between fall and winter of the school year. That's the chart at the bottom of the slide. Next slide. You'll also see that this slide allows us to compare the fall and winter performance, as well as the participation rates will be listed on this slide for reading proficiency goal, interim goal. And then, as usual, we have a slide that disaggregates the data by race, ethnicity, student populations, and we've included gender as well. And then this presentation also includes a slide on interim goal 1.2, which is the % of grade 2 students reading at or above benchmark on M-class. On this next slide, again, you'll see a chart and a graph where we can see our annual goal targets on the graph above the dotted line, and the chart compares the fall to winter performance. Similarly, it's a subpopulation slide, but this focuses on grade 2, includes race, ethnicity, special subpopulations, and gender, but this chart focuses on 2 versus the other one that was K1. Mm-hmm. And then per usual, we have a few slides on the reading proficiency next steps, the strategic action plan to improve student performance on the interim goals 1.1 and 1.2. Next slide. So this is a high-level overview of what the approach is, which should be a synergy of professional learning on early literacy specifically, as well as our instructional improvement cycles and those collaborative data conversations. And on the next slide, you'll see the specific pillars that are broken down by curriculum, instruction, professional learning, data discussions, and our multi-tiered systems of support. So you can see on this chart the progress to date, and we can dive into this more deeply at our formal goal monitoring discussion. And that concludes the technical report. And I should have shared at the beginning, this reflects the goals that we've been working together on as a board. And that's on slide 1. So that concludes the report, and we'll chat at the next board meeting on this.
Thank you, Dr. Bryant. Just like to remind board members to send your questions in as soon as you have them formulated, so we can have a really robust discussion at our next meeting. And that brings us to our public comment period, our first period of the night. So now is the time for us to hear from the public. We welcome your comments, which are very important to us. The board has set aside an hour at the beginning of its meetings for those community members and or students who would like to, who have signed up and would like to give public comment. Those not heard during the first hour will be heard at the end of the agenda. This is an opportunity for board members to listen and for members of the public to share their views. Please note the following. All public comments are limited to 3 minutes. The timer is in front of the dais, and all speakers will receive a courtesy alert when there are 30 seconds remaining. Speaking time may not be shared or may not be given to or shared with others. When your name is called, please come to the podium, state your name, and direct your comments to the chair. Please understand, again, that this is not a time for dialogue. The purpose of this agenda item is for you to speak and for the board to listen. If you have handouts that you would like to share with the board, please give them to Mrs. Sullivan to my left, and she will make sure each board member and the staff receive copies. Finally, I'd like to call your attention to the blue and white sheet that is at the door as you enter the boardroom. That gives a detailed decorum guidelines for expectations while in the boardroom. So please review that and govern yourselves accordingly during your public comments to the board. So with that, I'll call our first speaker. I think is it Adina Roberts? Welcome, Adina. And we can pull that mic down so she can pull it the mic down so she can, yeah, there you go. You have 3 minutes.
Going to start?
Yes.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
So I like Ignite because we get to see old friends and make new friends in different classes with different ages. Also, I don't really have a science time in my regular class, but Ignite is like a science class. We learn about animals, new places, and electricity. My favorite thing that I did in Ignite was making a lemon battery, which actually made electricity, and playing with plasma balls. There used to be 4 people, and once our teacher had to leave for like a week, and it broke our hearts so much. We were so sad we didn't get to do Ignite. And so now, and that was only like 4 people, but now there's like 15 people, and if we couldn't do Ignite, it would hurt so many of our hearts. Yeah, that's done.
Thank you so much. Was that your last comment? Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming tonight.
My name's Adina, and I go to Chinook Elementary.
Right. Thank you, Adina. Next, we have Chelsea Ambrose. Chelsea. Welcome, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Chelsea Ambrose, and I teach elementary art at Kincaid Elementary School and Gladyswood Elementary School. I was going to use my testimony today to talk about how important our TAs are and how they're underpaid and how consequently we can't seem to keep them. But in light of this afternoon's news, the proposal to cut art and health next year and instead offer STEAM classes and require classroom teachers to teach health, I think it's more prudent to speak to my experience as an art teacher. First off, as a former classroom teacher, I will tell you that classroom teachers' schedules are already completely full so that they can meet their required academic minutes. They will not have time to teach health. It won't be taught. I could offer you stats on why art education matters, but I think my perspective as someone actually in an art classroom is more valuable to share, seeing as the people making this proposal don't have the privilege of having what I truly believe to be the best job ever as elementary art teachers. Yes, art teaches transferable skills like creativity and collaboration and grit, but art just matters for art's sake. Trying to lump art into STEAM will only water down the subject. Art is academic inherently. Students are getting science and math and technology in their classrooms, and they need time away from technology to interact with one another and work with their hands. They learn skills in art they would never be exposed to elsewhere. Ceramics, weaving, batik, printmaking, the list goes on. A lot of my students love art. I had a student tell me the other day that I was their second favorite teacher. It's hard to compete with a PE teacher. I'll let it slide. But art especially provides an outlet for those students who are struggling, like that student, behaviorally or in academics that are taught in the classroom. It's a place where students can feel safe and heard and successful. And lumping art in with science and technology and engineering and mathematics inherently threatens that safe space. My students build relationships amongst one another and with me in art class. A month ago or so, the school board talked about chronic absenteeism. We don't really know the answer, but the most concrete solution y'all came up to was building relationships with students, and art is the space that allows for that. I had a student who is chronically absent come up to me at recess. She said she was sorry she missed her class yesterday. I reminded her to make sure to come to school on time on Tuesday so she won't miss art. Is this going to get her to school every day? Probably not. But is it one piece in solving the problem of getting our students to school that we are but it is one piece in solving that problem of getting our students to school that we are all grappling with. I'll leave you with my own experience. Obviously unbiased, I love art. I was lucky enough to attend a magnet school growing up. We had science and we had art, so STEAM, art. I loved science, but I especially loved art and I felt successful and I heard in my art classes. Can I tell you what day of the week science was in third grade? No, but to this day, 25 years later, I can tell you that I had art class every Tuesday. That's how much it mattered. Thank you so much for your hard work. Thank you for your support in BSA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Jennifer Phillips. Welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I came about a month ago, I guess, or 2 months ago, December 5th, because that's 2 months. And I got cut off. So I'm going to be a lot shorter this time. But I want to commend the last two public advocates, the student and the art teacher, because I think both of those things are really important for our students. And the last time I came here, they were talking about how important school attendance is. And so I went back to my classroom and checked my attendance for second quarter Ignite. I've been an Ignite teacher since 2005. So my third grade Ignite attendance was 92.6%, fourth grade 96.1%, fifth grade 95.3%, and 90% for sixth graders. So many of my students say they come to school because of Ignite. Anchorage School District receives state funding for every identified gifted student. This funding is intended to meet the requirement of the Alaska State Statute to provide educational services to gifted students. I question the legality of cutting this educational program. Currently, based on the Ignite program having been cut more than 60% in the last 10 years, Ignite teachers are stretched thin. There are 20 Ignite teachers serving 60 elementary schools with over 2,000 Ignite students, gifted students from Girdwood to Chuyak. Every year, I started teaching the Ignite program in 2005. Almost every year, when the Anchorage school district writes a budget, Ignite is cut. Is this a charade? Gifted students and their educational programs should not be pawns in some sort of like, let's get all the parents and students riled up. I'm asking all of you as our elected board to send a clear message to the district to stop this charade. You have been selected by our community to withhold our educational mission. Please stand up for this program. Listen to your constituents and let the school district know you will never pass a budget that includes cutting a program that meets the needs of our gifted students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Robin Weatherall. Robin, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Robin Weatherall. I'm an Ignite teacher expert. I also work with gifted identification. This is my 26th year in ASD. Friday, we learned the Ignite program will be cut from 20 teachers to 2. How 2 teachers will cover 60 elementary schools and 2,000 students was not shared. This cut will end the Ignite program. Emphasis in elementary classrooms is often on students who are at or below grade level to ensure they make a year's academic growth. It is assumed advanced learners will automatically make a year's growth. Ignite is designed to help advanced learners stay challenged and engaged so they graduate. Alaska statutes regarding programs for gifted children states every school district shall establish educational services for gifted children, including student identification, eligibility, and learning plans. The Ignite program provides opportunities for gifted students to work with peers at their academic level. They are challenged with work that has depth and complexity at an accelerated pace. Students learn vocabulary, logic strategies, hands-on exploration and creation, and self-evaluation. Social emotional learning is encouraged through small and large group discussions and by studying habits of mind characteristics of success. We cover as much material in 2 hours as a typical classroom covers in a day. Units are designed by teachers who meet the state's gifted education requirements. Units are not individual activities, but a group of activities leading to culminating projects. They incorporate language arts, math, science, and social studies. Rather than looking for specific answers, the goal is for gifted students to explore ways to think and learn and analyze and discuss. Ignite students are encouraged to find potential answers and support their answers. Ignite is often the highlight of the week. Attendance is high because gifted students enjoy the opportunity to be challenged. Our semester-long units allow Ignite students to explore history of communication codes and ciphers, Middle Ages, flight, probability and statistics, insects, visual and spatial math, forensic science, rainforests, roller coaster physics, organ dissections. One school board core value states to best serve students, schools should provide every student the opportunity to reach his or her potential. We believe students learn differently, and as such, each classroom and or school must teach the curriculum in a way that meets the needs of each student. The state of Alaska recognizes gifted students as having special needs and provides an extra 20% of the base student allocation for each identified gifted student. Providing enrichment to every student is great, but gifted learners need opportunities where they are not waiting for classmates to finish. They need Ignite education to challenge and encourage them to soar to their fullest potential. Please.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Namari Bagayoko. And please state your name when you come up. I know I messed it up. Thank you. Welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Anchorage School Board, my name is Namari Bagayoko. My wife and I are the parents of twins who are 3rd grade Japanese immersion students at Sand Lake Elementary School. Both participate in the Ignite program. I come before you today with a plea, one that echoes the sentiments of countless parents, teachers, and students across our community. I come to defend the Ignite program from the looming threat of cancellation due to budget cuts. The Ignite program is not just another line item in the budget. It's a beacon of opportunity for our brightest minds, a sanctuary for creativity, and a nurturing ground for future leaders and innovators. To slash this funding would be to snuff out the flames of potential that burn brightly within our students. As you may know, Ignite is a weekly pull-out program for students in grades 2 to 6. What you may not know is that Ignite is the most anticipated, engaging, and challenging class of their week. It sparks creativity, curiosity, and the desire for deeper, independent learning in our children. Mrs. Randazzo is a Sand Lake Ignite teacher, and she creates wonderful projects that stretch her students' minds. To quote my son Nawali, Mrs. Randazzo is a fantastic teacher who has great ideas, teaches us about habits of mind, and makes us better people. Let's review a few of the interesting projects they have completed in Ignite. They created a mini submarine that they could induce to float or sink. They dissected an owl pellet to learn about its diet. They dissected a squid and then taught me that the squid is a cephalopod that uses jet propulsion to move. Most recently, they cut open diapers to obtain polyacrylate, also known as waterlock, a super absorber. So these days, they've been walking around the house with swollen bags of polyacrylate and teaching me why a diaper is so absorbent. This inspired learning is why we send our children to school. Let's not forget the purpose of education, to cultivate and nourish the unique talents and abilities of every child. The Ignite program does just that. It provides these exceptional students with the challenges, resources, and support they need to thrive academically, intellectually, and socially. Moreover, the benefits of the Ignite program extend far beyond the individual students it serves. By nurturing our gifted learners, we're investing in the future prosperity of our community. These students will go on to make significant contributions in fields ranging from science and technology to arts and humanities. They will become many of the entrepreneurs, innovators, and thought leaders who drive progress and shape our collective future. Yes, I understand the financial challenges we face. Budget cuts are never easy, and difficult decisions must be made. But let us not balance the budget by cutting the program for our gifted students. Let us instead seek creative solutions, explore alternative sources of funding, and prioritize the long-term success of our educational system. In conclusion, I urge you, esteemed members of the Anchorage School Board, to reconsider the proposal to cancel the Ignite Gifted and Talented program. Let us stand together in support of our gifted students, reaffirming our commitment to excellence, opportunity, and the limitless potential of every child in our district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Lindsay Bell Sobolik. Lindsay? Yeah, in person. Okay, we'll go on. Norman Beasley II. Welcome, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, thanks for allowing me today to talk. So as a manager, also a business owner, and I have kids of my own, and after hearing about Ignite, the way you're kind of going about getting rid of these programs, stuff like that, and I'll tell you from a hiring manager, I mean, I've declined well over 30 people because of their academic background, the way that they hold themselves, their ethical skills or integrity, and the way that they even carry themselves. It's something even my 10-year-old daughter can even kind of talk about, is that she's like, well, Dad, these kids, they aren't getting the teachings that they need. You know, a lot of parents aren't able to be there for their kids as much as, I can. I'm very fortunate about that. I was a grinder. I still am. My wife wonders how I even sleep. I go to bed after my family and I wake up before they get up. So, and kind of hearing about the Ignite going away, a lot of parents are leaving the state. I have a detailing mechanic shop, and, I deal with cars that are price point more than I'll even afford. I'm just not going to buy them. And these people are leaving the state because there's no value left here. Why am I going to raise my kid here when they're not going to have a future? Why am I going to stay here when my kid's going to actually be left behind? My family comes from East Coast, and when my children finally, and my wife finally saw how fast these other states are moving, no comparison. These kids are about to grow up, and then they're going to be left to the wolves. I'm 37, and I run circles around kids that are 20. They can't handle the mental stress of working 8 hours, and it's very sad, to be quite honest. I came up here with something to say. I have it on paper, but to be quite honest, is the way that these schools are being handled. 5 years, I don't know what's going to happen with this state. I come from projects. The less you teach kids is the more problems you're going to have. And when I talk to other parents and when I've been on panels, the less you teach a kid is the more they're going to learn from somewhere else. The Joker, I love comics. The Joker is a real person. You let him to his own cognizance, and then he has to figure out how to survive and thrive. Don't be surprised when it's you he's going to survive and thrive on. Because these kids are going to learn the best way to survive and thrive. And if they have no way of education, and if there's no path forward, you are going to be dealing with villains. I'll tell you from my standpoint, I was raised by a dad for 3 years. I was a villain, and then when I lived with my mom, I had to get counseling. Because if a kid looked at me funny, we started squabbling. We were boxing. I had to survive and thrive. And you give these kids nothing to feed on, they will feed on something. And it's very dangerous if you go to these larger cities that have already foregone critical thought process, academics.
Thank you very much, sir. Next, we have, I think it's Matthew Carey. Welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Oh, Madam Chair, thanks for speaking and share some thoughts. These are going to be off the cuff, but I'll do my best. Thanks for the time. I just want to share a quote in support of, not cutting funding for Ignite and to further extent any of the immersion language programs. Both of my children are students at Scenic Park. Both are Ignite students. Both are in the Chinese immersion program there. I was also a Scenic Park student. It's my neighborhood school. My mom taught there for a number of years. And I'd like to see, what's been built in my community on the east side of town continue to further extent. My family is a second generation immersion family and gifted program family. Both of my sisters are gifted students. I was too. They did a lot better with it than I did. But I just wanted to share this note and share a couple of my other thoughts as the last gentleman and the previous experts that have shared testimony with me today. Public education does not exist for the benefit of students or the benefit of their parents. It exists for the benefit of social order. We've discovered as a species that it is useful to have an educated population. You do not need to be a student or have a child who's a student to benefit from public education. Every second of every day of your life, you benefit from that education. So let me explain why I like to pay taxes for schools, even though I don't personally have a kid in school. And this is a quote from an author named John Green. He's an author and a podcaster. And it basically boils down to, it's because I don't like living in a country with a bunch of stupid people. So not that we have a bunch of stupid people in this community, but our community does demand a lot more from us, not just based on our climate, because of our position in the world, our strategic importance to the rest of the country. And as the transportation hub, I went into the military after attending school. That helped me, get a couple things straight. But as my career progressed, I increasingly became distraught with the people that I worked with that had an extreme lack of critical thought. I currently work in regulation of the aviation industry now, and this continues to be a problem. I think both Ignite and immersion programs need to be funded. Please find some way to fund them to increasingly hold the position that Alaska and Anchorage has in the world. We need it for security, our dominance in the transportation industry, and also our, continuing place.
Thank you very much, sir. Next, we have Janelle Hartman. Welcome. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Bryan and school board members for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Janelle Hartman, and I'm a product of the Alaska Public School System, both in Fairbanks, North Scarborough, and a graduate from Anchorage School District. I can honestly say that I received a quality education, and I'm proud to be an alma mater of Bartlett Golden Bears. I now have the privilege of teaching in the district that taught me, and it is through these dual lenses that I consider the lack of funding impedes the learning objectives of the students' academic success. And I have a lovely thing written, but I'm going to go off script as well because I am a health specialist, and after today's news, I have to say that SEL health specialists matter in our district. We are teaching our students about themselves. Every year I start by saying that this is the most important class that they will have. It is all about these kiddos. It's about them as a student. It is about them learning. It's about them understanding how their even hygiene affects them as an individual and in their surrounding community. This is an important position in our district. This is an important district for them as students to learn. I fully believe that having relationships and building relationships with our students is the most important thing that we can do as an educator. And by being able to see all of my students K-6, it'll be K-5 next year, and building those relationships to teach them about the vulnerable aspects of growing up. Right now I'm in the middle of my human growth and development lessons, and I honestly got into health so I could teach children about menstruation and about what they are going through as their bodies change, so they can normalize what it is like to have a body, have systems that we can teach them and normalize what they go through as a child. As a total aside, I've also been paying attention to the school board meetings, whether I attend or listen, and you've asked us to go and talk with legislators. You've asked us to be on the front lines. We already are on the front lines in the classroom. We are there. We are writing and calling legislators to increase our base student allocation for our students. And now this is just one more thing that we're going to be fighting for as educators and for our students, and to provide this amazing class to our students so they can learn about themselves in a classroom that is dignified and normalized, and they can continue to grow into the amazing adults that our community deserves and that we. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our first hour of public comment. And that brings us to item E, consent agenda.
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
Moved in second to approve the consent agenda as written. Is there any opposition to approving? Member Donnelly. Oh, would you like to pull?
Madam President, thank you. I'd like to pull item E, PSD Memorandum 108.
Okay, item 8 becomes under action item F1. Anything else? Seeing, hearing no other persons, board members wishing to pull anything, we will now vote on approving the consent agenda as amended. Any opposition? Seeing, hearing none. Item E, the consent agenda is approved except for item 8, which is now F1. We need to vote to approve the consent agenda, but there was no objection. Now, but member Wilson is online. Member Wilson, do you have any objection to approving the consent agenda as amended? You're on mute, *6. I think, go back, *6.
I do not have any objection.
Okay, thank you. So the consent agenda is approved as amended. Thank you. That brings us to item F1. which is ASD Memorandum number 108.
Madam President, I move to approve ASD Memorandum 108, approval of superintendent contracts.
Moved in second to approve the superintendent's contract. Moved in second, moved by member Jacobs, second by member Higgins. Discussion, member Donnelly, you pulled it.
I'm ready to vote, Madam President.
Oh, okay. Is there any, member Wilson, I can't see your hand. Do you have any questions or comments on memorandum number 108?
I do not.
Okay, let's call for the vote.
Member Higgins,
We're voting.
member Jacobs,
Yes.
member Lessons,
Yes.
member Donnelly,
No.
member Holloman,
Yes.
member Wilson,
Yes.
President Bellamy,
Yes. So that passes, 6 yeas, 1 nay. Okay, that brings us now to item G, which is our non-action items. Of course, these will come back before you at our next meeting. Is there anyone wish to pull an item for discussion? Member Jacobs.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I'm hoping we can continue the topic of our work session regarding G1. We had it kind of interrupted from the portion that pertained to Ignite. So if we could restart there and potentially finish the presentation, I think that might be helpful. Thank you.
So I could barely hear you, Member Jacobs. I'm sorry. I know you said you wanted to restart or at least continue the discussion on Ignite.
Well, specifically, I think we should restart G1 and continue the topic of our work session, which was a presentation from administration on the
G1.
budget.
Okay.
Yep. So I would propose we continue the topic of our work session and probably restart it from Ignite because we only partially completed that portion of the presentation. Thank you.
Hey, Dr. Bryant, can we have the team here?
Yes, we should have our same presenters from the previous presentation.
Yeah, so let's take a 5-minute recess while the team gathers itself. I think I can see most of them, but we are missing a couple. So let's take a 5-minute recess and come back to talk about G1, especially the Ignite program. And let's see that. A little technical difficulty. You got it? All right. So we are calling ourselves back to order. We're on item G1, actually, to complete our discussion or continue our discussion from earlier today. Member Jacobs, you pulled G1. Did you want to say anything before I pass on to the superintendent?
Yeah, just to clarify, I don't know that I pulled it as much as asked that we complete a presentation from our work session covering the same topic. And as we were in the middle of the topic of elementary STEAM, especially for those watching at home, there might be less cognitive dissonance if we start from the beginning and then finish the remainder. So would appreciate the team's willingness to do that. Thank you.
When you say from the beginning, you're meaning from the elementary. Okay, elementary STEAM. Dr. Bryant.
Sure. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Member Jacobs, for pulling this. We're happy to review what we shared previously with the board. You know, I also want to share some of my earlier comments for how we frame this conversation, which is that we're in a very precarious financial situation. We're in a weak financial position. Some of the reasons why is that this budget, while carefully put together to ensure that we're not laying off thousands of employees, we are considering very serious proposals such as an increase of PTR +1, a reimagining of beloved programs, including Ignite. But the fact of the matter is that we are in a $90+ million structural deficit, and 70 million of those dollars are being addressed through fund balance. So what that means is that the district is proposing spending down to 5% of our emergency savings account, and that puts us at a lot of risk should there be some sort of, God forbid, an earthquake or other, health event that would require cash on hand. So with that said, one of the proposals being discussed would be a reimagining of the Ignite program into something that can still fulfill our mission to provide opportunities to ensure success for students in life, but is also at a lower cost per student. So I would love for the board and for the public to consider this proposal on its own merits. And of course, we can also deliberate what is a very difficult decision of whether or not to continue the Ignite program. Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to hand it off to the team.
Good evening, board. This is Eric Visti. I'm the Senior Director for Elementary Education. And so I'll introduce what we are proposing is an elementary science, technology, engineering, art, and math program, or what is called STEAM. And I'll kind of back up a little bit. Some of the conversation for this proposal has come from our conversation, those difficult conversations about what would it look like for all of our students if, we reduce our Ignite budget. So what do we do for all students? We recognize that students need real world application, hands-on learning, problem-based problem solving, and how do we provide equity of access to all students to be able to have those type of services in our schools across the district and elementary schools. And so in that conversation and looking back at what some schools are already existing and doing right now and have been doing for a few years now, we examined a STEAM model. And so a STEAM model really is that science, technology, engineering, and art and math. And within this proposal, what we'll be talking about is shifting how we deliver services in art, shifting how we deliver services in health, and shifting how we deliver services in science so that all students have access to benefit. It's not an easy conversation. It's going to impact many people. And again, it's just not easy. But it's a conversation that we need to have and look at a proposal moving forward. And so what this would do would be providing stronger context with math in a specialist format, in a pull-out model for all students. Math would still be taught in the classroom, but you'd also bring math across in an explicit model of science and in engineering and in the visual arts. So art wouldn't be going away. In fact, it would be more integrated across content areas, providing bigger connections for all students. Under this model, it would be hands-on, real-world problem solving. You'd be looking at critical thinking. You're looking at complex problem solving related to current standards that we have for today's students and looking for the future. It takes what we have currently in the visual arts Music would stay, just to clarify from the arts. The visual arts would be integrated into this STEAM model. So if our FTE that is currently in our art teachers, that would be reimagined in terms of this STEAM model. And so art would crosswalk through other content areas. It would be a difference in how we deliver art services and art instruction. Definitely be a difference. But it would draw broader connections across math, across design, across science, across engineering, and vice versa. It also looks at exploration, discovery, collaboration, all things that all students in Anchorage School District and even larger benefit from. And it would provide interconnected across our overall global economy. We're talking like technology, engineering, looks at next generation science standards. And then when we look at our other four goals besides math, we also have our college and career readiness. And so looking ahead and looking at our future and looking at our local economy and looking at our local community, STEAM is a relevant and strong consideration for how we can deliver services to students. Excellent. If you look at our data and our science scores, there's huge disparities with our kids, our students across schools. So one of this would do would provide greater access for all. Some of the next steps that we have, again, this is a high level overview. There would be a lot of work to be done this semester going into the summer for a launch in the fall, is we provide an instructional program input process. We work with our teachers, we work with our leadership teams to develop what does a program evaluation look like? What's the goal of the program? How do we measure that? What's the curriculum that we're going to be using? And then we're going to be having to make really hard conversations with our health teachers and our art teachers from a displacement process. We'd be moving into science instruction. We'll be coming out of the classroom. We'd still meet our state statutes for health and for other areas and provide that instruction in the classroom. And then the other part would be the math emphasis. That crossing of math connected across content areas would be more powerful, and I believe would be supporting our school board goals. And the last thing, when you're talking about relationships with kids, a lot of our current structures, and this kind of gets into the nuts and bolts and operationally how we run in schools, our health teachers and our art teachers are highly itinerant. So if you're an elementary age student, you see your art teacher twice a month, right? You see your health teacher twice a month. Now you have a teacher full-time in your school. For the most of our schools, we have some pretty small schools that would have to be split. For most of our schools, you have a full-time teacher in your building with connections every day walking down the hall. And so there's a lot of benefit that you could also have from having that structure in our elementary programs beyond just standards that they're going to be teaching to. So those are some different components that we're working on, we're envisioning. We're trying to be creative and look how can we do things differently under the circumstances that we have, and how can we still do the right for kids. That's my presentation.
Questions? Member Jacobs.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Appreciate the presentation, Mr. Visti. We looked at, and you brought up the slide regarding the 5th grade science scores. Just to make sure I tracked, are we indicating that current Ignite enrollment doesn't mirror the district population as a whole, but then specifically the enrollment breakdowns that would be needed to address the achievements gaps that we're seeing in the data?
So I've got our Ignite demographics here in front of me. So Ignite is offered for students 2 through 6. And let's keep in mind, gifted at Rogers Park, we're not talking about the gifted HG program. We're talking about our Ignite services. In grades 2 through 6, we have 16,501 students, right? Students that are accessing Ignite services are just under 2,100 kids, okay? If you look at our Alaska Native population, we have about 10% of our overall grades of 2 through 6 are Alaska Native. Only 4% of our overall Ignite population is Alaska Native. Our white students, which make up about 40% of our grades 2 through 6, in Ignite, they make up 57% of our overall population. Our Black students, 4% are in grades 2 through 6, 2% Ignite. Our Hispanic is 12% overall, and it's only 9% Ignite. some of these wonderful opportunities, what we're looking at of how to do is how to provide some of these problem solving and these pieces across all schools, so all students benefit.
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you. And then we heard compelling testimony earlier regarding challenges of identifying students for gifted education. Can you speak to what the intersection is between the shift in models would be and how that would impact identifying students for gifted?
Yeah. So we have at elementary schools, we have database meetings at least 3 times a year. So we do benchmark testing and look at all students, where are they falling? Are they accelerating? Are they meeting the mark at that point in the year, or are they falling behind fall, winter, spring, right? We also have thankfully this year, our teachers are engaged in collaborative teams weekly, looking at student data, looking at essential standards and identifying what do all students need to know and be able to do? How do we know they're doing it? What happens if they already know it and move forward? And how do we plan for that? And so we have now structures that are embedded within our schools to be able to provide plans for how do we address all of our students. In the STEAM model, what we'd be looking at is providing a more robust access to those content areas through a higher level of engagement levers. And then we also have our MTSS systems that we have within the elementary school through WIN. And so those data point conversations of looking at all advanced learners, how do we move all of our advanced learners ahead? That would be the pathway forward.
Did you have another follow-up?
One other follow-up, if I might.
Okay,
Yeah,
and then member less. Okay.
We alluded to it during the work session, I think, but it sounds like the administration sees an intersection between the STEAM model in elementary and our goal regarding college career and life readiness in the academy model. Could you speak to that maybe?
I'm not probably as eloquent as Dr. Kirsten Johnson, but within like the profile of a graduate, one of the things that is an emphasis is those communication skills and those problem solving skills and those collaboration skills. A lot of the things that you do within a STEAM model from project-based learning and teaming up with your peers, and I heard testimony about that even today, that is embedded within the model from STEAM. So from that standpoint, it would go straight on up in terms of how we engage all of our learners.
Okay, member Lessons.
I think there are many teachers who integrate science beautifully into the overall structure of their year. I think of my own kids' kindergarten experience where ducklings were hatched. For many, weeks, they were anticipated, they were written about, they were drawn about, they were then monitored and cared for as a class. That's one sort of moment, one little snapshot. I think about the writing that's done in a first grade classroom, maybe about plant life cycles, and how engaging that can be. Is really hard right now for teachers to find the time to do science in their days. But I believe that it is something that shouldn't be removed wholly from their prerogative. I am actually really concerned about potential lack of writing that students would no longer be doing because science is now explicitly excluded from their school day. So maybe talk to me a little about writing, because I feel like that's something we don't talk about up here at the board at all.
I can speak to the writing because the CKLA curriculum has a strong writing component in it. So they are incorporating writing, and we're adopting the 4-5 curriculum for next year. So I anticipate that it'll only get stronger. And I'm not sure what the STEAM model will look like, but I would think that there would be some writing involved there as well. The beauty about what you just said with what your students were able to experience is that this would be district-wide. And so all kids would be experiencing something similar, maybe not with ducks, but they would all be getting all some for all, more for some.
Other questions before we continue? Yes, John, Mr. Pack?
Well, is there statistics from other states or districts around this model? I'm familiar with the acronym, but now I am. And I was wondering how well something like arts, which I thought was for the humanities, could coexist with more of a science or technical based, I guess, education.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. I don't have the statistics to be able to give you. I know through some consultation through our fine arts department, one of the concepts is looking at from the visual arts side and design and how design and art is actually crosses over to other content areas. So there has been discussion about that. However, from the statistics that you're asking for, I don't have that.
Can I say something? I think that a lot of districts in the lower 48 can do a STEAM model or a STEM model, but it tends to be after school hours. And I think the beauty of this model is that it's during the school day for all kids' tasks.
Yes, okay, Member Holloman.
This has come up a number of times, and I think part of the stress of it is that it always comes up under a budget consideration. And I'll say at the outset, I think the administration has done a really good job picking through the district to try to find where to reduce things with as little harm as possible. But saying that, I think it's important that we acknowledge it's harm. I'm a big believer that if we can do less with the resources or if we can do more with the resources we have, we should be doing that anytime. It shouldn't happen at budget time. It should happen anytime through the year. So this is a reaction to the fact that we're not going to have the resources we're going to have. And by and large, unless somebody comes up with some magic, that means we get less done. I'm a former Ignite parent, and I know that part of the magic of Ignite was it made my son feel special, which of course he is.
Always.
But yeah, it made him feel like he was a little bit more of a science person than perhaps the ordinary third or fourth grader would. And if we had the resources, my choice would be to continue that, but also have other pull-out programs so that the kids that had a special interest in different areas felt smarter because they were being pulled out for those areas. To that degree, I think anytime we change Ignite to include all students, we sort of erase something that's very special to the kids. I think we as adults are looking at it as a personnel resource allocation problem. And it's easy to just lose track of like, how does this impact the mind of a 10-year-old? And my 10-year-old knew he was being chosen for a program that not very many other people weren't. And he was being put in a room with a bunch of other kids that had a particular interest in science. I don't know that it was actually his science acumen or his intellect that made it so special to him, but he loved the activities. He loved being part of it. Whether the instruction was actually great or not, those things I think helped drive him and make a better student out of him. And like I say, I wish what we were doing is looking at ways to replicate that feeling, generating that feeling of a student in all of our students in their area. There's some kids that organically don't like science, and there are some kids that organically love math, and there's some that organically love art and music and all those other things. So to some degree, I'm always troubled when we say we're going to reinvent this and do it in a different way. I almost would prefer we say we're stopping this. We're doing something different, and we're hoping to bring good science instruction to all students, and that's absolutely admirable. But we're no longer really trying to do the Ignite program because by its original definition, it was a special program for kids that had a special interest in that, being taught by teachers that had a special interest in teaching that, and not all elementary teachers love science. I just think to some degree, we should acknowledge to the parents and the staff and the students that we're not replacing it with something that's the same or better. We are adjusting what we're doing because inflation is eating our money. And we can't do what we did last year with the same amount of money that we're going to get this year. Same time, I see some value in not just abandoning things completely. I felt like we saw it with middle school, where when we were talking about eliminating teams, some people in the administration said, but we're still going to do everything we were doing. We're just going to do it with less time and less people. And I just always felt like we would come out ahead on the true scale, at least, if we just said, we think this is the right thing to do. We think it's a great thing to do, but we just can't afford it. And sadly, I would have to say to the people that came to talk about Ignite tonight, I just don't think we can afford it. I think if we occasionally had flat funding, it probably makes us healthier. It makes us take a harder look at programs. It makes us skinny down perhaps a few extra staff here and there that we really can do without. But if you do it year after year after year, you get past cutting little bits of fat and excess here and there, and you start cutting muscle. And we've been cutting muscle for a few years, and this budget is going to cut more. This won't be as good of a district if this is our budget, and it's not anybody's fault here. We have too many kids in classrooms. We are eliminating programs that engage kids, and we're losing the resources to deal with kids that are extremely difficult to deal with. They take more resources to keep them in class and keep them in school and keep them on track. And I know a lot of people in this room and a lot of people in the community have been talking to the legislature for years, and we just haven't been able to make much of a change. And this year and last year seems particularly grim. So I want to speak in favor of the Ignite program. I do think what you're talking about is alternative activity utilizing the resources that we're bringing us Ignite makes a lot of sense, but it's not the same thing. I think we should let the community and the legislature know that we're doing something different with what we've got. We're dropping something we thought was valuable for years. We're dropping something that clearly the community thinks is valuable, because it's pretty hard to stir this many people up to testify and send I'm sure everybody on the board has gotten 2 or 3 emails about Ignite over the past week. And I'm kidding. It's more like 50 or 60. It's been a small avalanche. And that just doesn't happen because 1 or 2 people are upset with something. So I do think it's important that we emphasize to the community when we're losing things that are valuable. Ignite in its original form absolutely was one of those things that's created a huge following. We can talk about parents coming in and being a second generation Ignite family. That means you've been doing something that really had an impact on people for a very long time. And we're having to drop those things because funding is staying the same, costs are going up. If I could think of another place we could pull those FTE from, I would absolutely want to do that. But I don't know where it would be. Everything we have to do hurts something, and hurts things pretty severely. So I want the public to know that we feel that, we understand that, we're out of ideas on what to do differently.
Thank you, Member Holloman. Any back to Member Jacobs?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. To circle back to Student Representative Pack's question, we talked about in our work session that there are a number of ASD schools utilizing the STEAM method in elementary right now. How many schools are there? And then I think I asked specifically for data and at least a better lens as to how we can improve student outcomes, utilizing this new model. Is that something that administration can work through over the next few weeks?
Yes, we can work through it and get that information for the board. To answer your first question, there are currently 9 schools that are using a STEM or STEAM-based model. At least a whole or in part. They're using part of this art and health staffing to be able to do that.
Do those schools get extra staffing?
They do not. There's, to clarify, President Bellamy, they're doing essentially what this proposal is bringing health into the classroom, flipping the health model so that the kids get full health services to be able to access some of the science content standards.
Great. Other questions before we continue? Member Higgins.
Yeah, I guess I just want to make just a couple comments. I've been accused of thinking every child will get an IEP, and I'm guilty. Because we really want all the kids to advance as quickly as they can at the pace that's comfortable for them. And some of these programs, Ignite and others, are really geared to me towards kids that are, advancing differently and need different type of opportunities to be able to keep up. I mean, I've said it before, if you're in 3rd grade and you're reading the 5th grade level, they need to be 6th grade at the end of that year. We need to let every child advance a full year academically and let them go as fast as they want. Commission on Skills in America did theirs, and they felt like all kids should be ready to graduate with high school in 10th grade. The last 2 years should be for an associate degree or career technology. They think that if we let that go, it will go. So I don't mind alternatives. I like the idea of strengthening the curriculum, but I also am very committed to making sure that all kids are advancing a full year academically. That's my thing that I just really get focused on. And I just don't know. I'd like to see some information, some locations I can go look at to see what they've done and just to look at the background on the success rates, because I do like looking at proven models that have been successful. And I just haven't seen enough on this one at this point in time. So I would like to hopefully ask the administration to provide that. Some locations that we can look at, that I can go out there and look at on the internet, talk to people, and just feel comfortable on what the issues are, the pros and cons. There's always pros and there's always cons to every alternative. And I realize we have limited resources, but I really want to get a hold of this one a little bit more than what I've got.
Thank you. Anybody else? Back to Member Lessons.
I think if we start talking about the cost per pupil, there are benefits to that conversation. And it may also come back to in unexpected ways. We've talked about the cost of certain sports per pupil. That far exceeds the cost per pupil of the Ignite program. Actually, I mean, I think it's really important to talk about the cost per pupil of different things, of different activities. The board continues to have an option on the table and really a terrible Hunger Games situation, right? We could remove these opportunities from students to provide these opportunities to other students. I mean, that's really what we're left with at this point in time. And it's not fair to the K-12 spectrum. So I find that upsetting is not the right word, but upsetting. I appreciate Member Holloman being clear about where he stands. I'm very concerned, as I shared earlier, about the integrity of health delivery. I'm very concerned about the loss of, we'll call it the progression of fine motor skill development in art. I think about kindergartners and they're learning to do things with their hands. And you can, put Legos together too, and that's, a great thing to do. But that are developed through art skills that may not be developed as wholly or as robustly in program that has yet to be developed. So we're casting judgment, or you're asking us to make some kind of, I don't know, are you actually asking us to make a judgment, or is this a path forward? what are are we having a conversation about this tonight? Or is this something that's going to come before us? It's not in the budget, right? This description of this change is not in the budget. The elimination of Ignite is in the budget. Okay, so maybe I'll just change this rant into a question. Where will we approve a path forward, or is this within the realm of administrative oversight?
Thank you, Member Lessons. To be clear, it's our intent that if the board were to approve reducing Ignite by 18 positions, we would earmark the 2 positions that were assigned to Ignite to develop district-wide curriculum and support for this initiative. So that would be the understanding. And if there were for desire to put this in writing in the budget or a memorandum, we're happy to do that. But the big decision that needs to be made by the board is where we fall with regards to the Ignite program for the reasons that we've discussed.
So, okay, go on.
Would the administration then anticipate additional fiscal needs, signing a contract with someone to provide some kind of service related to the creation of this program for some additional amount of money? I mean, we have consultants providing different services.
We still have to explore different avenues, but we did talk about Project Lead the Way, one of the options, just one, because we're exploring. We have to put the committee together to talk about what will this look like. But we would anticipate that within teaching and learning, we would be able to provide professional development. What outside services we would need, we don't know yet. But ultimately, what we would like to see is that it's in-house within teaching and learning to provide supports. Say if we did go Project Lead the Way, then we would have to use some of their training, but then they also train trainers of trainers, which would be within our school system.
Member Lessons, we currently have resources invested in like our science kits and other things. So this would be part of taking what we're already doing and looking at how do we move and shift those over. So that's part of the work that we're working on. So all the details of that hasn't been pushed out, but we're looking at those internal costs that we already have between our curriculum and how would that just be moved over in a different way.
But the refurbishing of the kits are in this budget. Of the science kits.
They're already in our budget.
Okay. Okay.
So I guess one final sort of process question. Going back to the weekly written guidance from the state of Alaska. So the district would provide for student identification with no Ignite teachers left or no Ignite supervisor anymore because we cut that from this budget. How would we be?
The only thing we cut from the budget were from the 20 teachers.
Okay, so is there somebody who would still be doing student identification in ASD of gifted students?
That we still haven't, because we're still in the sausage making, we haven't discussed that yet.
Okay. And then where would we see a process for the development of student learning plans for students who are deemed eligible for gifted education?
I think part of what Dr. Bryant said initially is that we would have to look at the policy that we wrote and go back in and correct it.
And then I'll just add that we'll also want to collaboratively work with DEED to ensure that they approve of this plan as well. But really, we wanted to start this initial conversation on STEAM to understand the board's willingness one way or another to consider this. And again, the reason why we're here is because of that per pupil allocation. And, to your point, Member Lessons, what you're sharing is exactly correct, that, given that we're using $70 million of fund balance this year, next year, I'm trying to think about what we'll cut for $70 million going into FY26 and forward. And that may very well include everything that you described. So I wouldn't say that any particular program is being targeted, but this is the reality that we're living in when the political realities is that we've had stagnant funding for almost a decade.
So what is the test? So we have the highly gifted program at Rogers Park. What is the criteria to be in Ignite?
The testing team starts off by looking at their MAP scores in reading and math. And when I believe it's at the 97 percentile or 99 percentile, then they start identifying those kids to be tested further. And so they do, I'm afraid to tell you the tests because I'm not really good at that. They do the COG-CAT test. And then, so they have this system in place to identify kids for tonight. And then in second grade, the testing team goes out and tests all second graders to start identifying.
So every second grader in that whole district
In the district
gets tested. And that's how we get the 2,100 students.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we go back to the graph on the science scores? What is that saying? I mean, 46% of Alaska Native students, what does the orange represent?
Oh, thank you for scale. The orange would be the far below.
Far below.
Yellow would be the.
Okay, did I miss anyway?
Thank you, President. That got missed in the.
All right.
Slide deck.
I mean, I thought that's what it was, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Can we get this in we already have it in math. I can pull that out. Okay, I don't know. Do we have any thoughts on the disparity that we're seeing in this chart, the science scores? I know science is not taught every single day. In the STEAM program, it will be taught every single day or embedded weekly.
STEAM would be taught weekly. So currently, STEM science is a 30-minute weekly or 60 minutes every 2 weeks in schools, kind of shift that depending on where they're at. I know a lot of schools with Alaska Reads Act and the emphasis with our core subject areas of math and our core subjects of reading, the emphasis in our elementary schools, we double down in those areas, right? It's a major emphasis. So in the school day, the practical side of it is sometimes, when a teacher is trying to fit everything into a 6.5-hour day, we lose some traction on some of those pieces. And so the emphasis here would be making sure we have that dedicated time for a core area that we do assess in. We have the Alaska Science Test, right, in 5th grade and 8th grade. These are things that we're measured by. And so we're looking at also how do we invest in those areas that are critical and core to what we need to be doing within the constraints that we have right now.
And if I may elaborate on something that Mr. Bissy shared in the work session, but I forget if he shared it during this session, this recap, if you will. But essentially, there are a number of underrepresented student demographics within Ignite currently. And the difference between the model being discussed right now is that STEAM would be inclusive of all students, and we get to differentiate through our MTSS and other pedagogical structures. So that's a fundamental difference where we leverage existing resources to focus on all of our student groups to tackle our goals and guardrails. Ignite, as it's currently designed, doesn't do that. That's something for board consideration.
Okay. Other questions before we move on? All right, let's move on to the next page.
All right. Thank you. For the record again, my name is Andy Ralph, Chief Financial Officer for the district. We're going to finish up our presentation from the work session. We discussed the special service changes, which included Ignite, the PTR increase in grades 4 through 12, other programmatic adjustments. But now we're going to get into our department on administration budgets and changes, and really just kind of going down the list quickly. Cut another staff member out of accounting. That's getting pretty difficult to do our jobs there, but I think we can make some more efficiencies there and try to keep operations going. HR staffing is changing a little bit. Project management, and that's just reclassifying positions. Project management, you see a 0.12 reduction there, and that's really, they reclassified a position, and to pay for it, they're moving that 0.12 into their capital projects fund. Mental health, it shows a zero balance there, but that assistant director came from the Whaley principal that was cut. So then they're doing that work, and they're going to be down that one behavior analyst. So their capacity is going down a little bit. Teaching and learning will be down one position overall. Pre-K staffing is going down. Most of that's there's 4 paraprofessionals that are being reduced. Those services are being provided through the special education pre-K services. And then they're increasing a special or assistant director. Along with the READS Act came considerably more preschool classrooms when you just need more support in that area. High school administration staffing is going to be reduced by 1 overall. The elementary admin staffing, this is the 7 FTE there. This was a holdover from the Creating Successful Futures program that used to be housed at Northwood up until 4 or 5 years ago, and then we brought it into the Ed Center kind of pre-COVID. And that program was where we would send students that have some behavior concerns over to Northwood for 6 or 9 weeks to help try to address some of those behavior things. And this model wouldn't have been to push those staff out to the schools where the students are currently in. However, as we find it difficult to hire positions, these have remained vacant for the last couple of years, so we are reducing those. IT staffing is going down a little bit. However, the overall cost goes up a slight bit just based on the changes in types of positions. We're cutting 1 communication specialist from the communication and outreach. The 3.72 increase in custodians, that's for the middle schools. As we're adding a third more kids into our seven of our middle schools, there's going to be more classrooms that need to be cleaned, and likely it's going to be dirtier, just more foot traffic through there. We're cutting a clerical position at operations, a security specialist that would be housed downstairs in this building. A little bit change in how maintenance staffs their facilities. So removing some clerical and changing those into more professional positions. We're having trouble staffing and keeping those positions. Removing 2 warehouse drivers. Those were originally paid for through ESSER funding. We added those back into the FY24 budget. However, in light of our situation, we're moving those as well. Overall staffing and health services going down. And then the big one is this departmental supplies, services, and equipment line for $4.3 million. The bulk of this is going to be Chromebooks that were previously funded for IT, not refreshing those. There's some other like network gear and teaching or classroom devices that aren't going to be refreshed with that money. There was a $1.2 million reduction in contracts for mental health, and that's for community counselors. However, that cost is going to be picked up through Project Aware. So the service isn't necessarily going away, but the funding source is changing on that one. And then about 1.2 million overall reduction in teaching and learning as we're looking at not doing a social studies adoption that was planned for next year, just in light of our current situation. We have about $925,000 in added duty. This is by and large coming also out of teaching and learning. That was an increase for FY24 for the READS Act that we had to pull teachers in for a few days early to get trained on that. So as we don't necessarily need those days anymore, we're going to pull it back. And then the district-wide travel of $329,000, that represents all but $100,000 of district-wide travel. And then we consolidated that into one account so we can make sure that it's all vetted properly before it happens and transferred out. Then lastly, we're going to do a 2-week hiring delay for non-emergency or I don't want to say critical positions, but the ones that are hard to fill. Like if we have a special education teacher that we want to post that job, we're not going to wait 2 weeks to post that job. We're going to do that immediately so we can get those hired. And the mechanics of how that looks is we would wait 2 weeks to post the job versus posting the job and then waiting 2 weeks to hire someone. That way an employee is not sitting around waiting to see if they have a job. Prospective people applying wouldn't necessarily see a difference the start to finish once they see a job posted. Again, this slide, like the other ones we looked at today, only includes the changes that have material effect on how services are provided. So there's other reductions. So this is not going to match out exactly to our Appendix C. There's other reductions in there, changes that aren't necessarily going to be reflected here, as they're not really going to change services. Like we've increased our attrition and vacancy rates by quite a bit, reduced the Ed Center rents through working with our lessor, and then like reduce legal fees, things like that that don't necessarily, and that's based on usage and historical usage going down. So really, those wouldn't be on here. It's not really going to change how the district operates. But kind of a high level overview of how we close the budget gap that was presented in our pro forma budget. And this is, I like to say, this is kind of a difficult task to do and really to show where those changes are. And a good example of that would be supplies. Like in our pro forma, we say supplies are going to increase 1.5–2% based on inflation. Not only did we not increase those supplies, we actually reduced them. So trying to reconcile the change from FY24's budget to FY25's budget with this other pro forma budget, it's incredibly difficult to really line out and make sense of when we're trying to show that. But at a high level, to address that $98 million gap, we included $71 million of fund balance, which should note that the way we got that fund balance is we saved a big chunk of our state money that was one time for this year, as well as having about a perpetual 400 or 450 vacant positions. So as we have those vacancies, more people waiving medical insurance, that money adds up and went back into our general fund to help use for the following year. We increased our interest earnings by about $2 million over what was in the pro forma, so about $5 million increase overall. E-rate went away and went into our telecoms as a reduction in our telecoms budget. Increase our rental and activity fees, that should generate about $300,000. And then our federal impact aid increased by about $800,000 above what we had put in our pro forma budget. So really about almost $74 million in new revenue that we use to help close that gap. And then as far as the expenditure changes, if you look at Appendix C, will kind of get you those FTE changes. But we're going to reduce about 96 FTE to balance this budget at a savings of about $25 million overall. So really kind of the takeaway is the revenue is going to be there one time. Going to the next slide, our class sizes are going to increase. Our services are going to be diminished. User fees will increase. We're going to have less flexibility for enrollment changes through taking away holdback teachers in our general ed as well as special education funds. We're going to have a lot more increased risk in this budget. Our emergency reserves are going to be depleted. Our increase in attrition estimates are going to put us really kind of precariously close to potentially going over budget if we have a big drop in enrollment, and we can't necessarily trim all our staff once they're on contract. And then our more aggressive revenue projections with our interest earnings. So as we go into this and draw our fund balance down to what is essentially about $6 million of spendable money, this could go south easily. And I just want to make the board aware that we're going to have that risk. I did want to discuss the attrition a little bit and how that works a little more and how we get that projection, because we increased our attrition estimates by about 13 million. That went up from about 28 million to 41 for the district. And really that's all these unfilled vacant positions and the medical waivers. But looking at kind of the historical nature of what our attrition has looked like over the years, in 2013, we had a little over $5 million of vacant positions, and we didn't have medical waivers at the time. I think that got adopted later, so you'll see that's part of the increase. But going up to FY23, you see we had about $51 million in unfilled positions and medical waivers. Part of that was us shifting some money over to ESSER money. So maybe 5 million or so we shifted to the ESSER funds to close out the SURSA Act grant. But you can just see those vacancies going up. The FY24 projected budget, that's about 41 million, or our projected ending for this year, about 41 million. Again, we had 28 million budgeted. And then about 41 million for our FY25 budget. A little bit lower on the percentage, as those blue bars represent our adopted salary and benefits. So as we get closer to trying to get to zero without going over, if we have a big drop in enrollment or another emergency, we could be in a pretty tight spot. So just making sure the board is completely aware of the implications of this budget if there were to be something comes up like that. Our transportation fund, again, this one is going to be funded majority by property taxes going up. Our transportation fund balance is now depleted after this year, and our state revenue is going down based on the enrollment going down and a stagnant $481 per student that hasn't changed since kids walked in the door in 2015. So that fund is going up by almost $1 million. We expect this all that to be paid for with local property taxes. Here's how those property taxes shake out for FY24 to FY25. Our assessed values that the state uses for calculating our required local contribution went down a little bit. And this is based on the calendar year 2023 full value determination. So that's gone down, which pushes our required local contribution down a little bit. And then the additional local contribution goes down with the decrease in state funding, and which is tied to the ADM declines. Transportation going up by about 4 million, and then debt service, our bonded projects, it goes down by about 3.3 million. So overall, the taxpayers should see a reduction of about 1.2 million, about 0.5%. This is how the tax cap looks. If you're not familiar with the Anchorage tax cap, the very bottom line of this is we're going to be about $5 million under our calculated tax cap, which is based on a 5-year average of population and CPI growth, plus new construction. So 226 million, you can see about that third line down. That was our general and transportation funding for last year. We expect that to go up to about 228 million, but it's below the 7 million or so additional tax cap authority that we would have. But again, the state limits the amount that we can collect, so we can't take that 5 million and put it into operational funds at this point. So that was the remainder of the presentation. We can turn it over to questions now.
Member Lessons.
Well, first I want to share that Mr. Ratliff spent an hour on the phone with me today, walking through a number of line items step by step. So I wanted to, again, thank you for that. That saved us all an hour of our time. One question that I have, so Juneau, the school district doesn't pay for their sports and activities. The borough does. In Fairbanks, the school district doesn't pay for ice hockey, ice time. To what extent can that $5 million be used? I don't think sports are an operations thing. That's my personal grounding. I have no standing, but to what extent can we explore whether sports and activities could be paid for under the tax cap, and then we could redirect the funds that we're currently allocating from operations to programs, class sizes, things of value that way.
We can certainly check with Deed to see if that was allowable, just based on having Juneau's situation do that, and then what you've seen in Juneau in the paper. I'd be hesitant to say that's acceptable because Juneau does it. So we'd like to want to do our own research before we do that. We get in a situation where we could have potentially over collected. But certainly I'll try to run that down this week and get you guys a response to it.
Great. Thank you. Member Jacobs?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. We looked at our budget process in terms of the timeline, which is felt like many hours ago. If the board delayed adoption of our budget until the 27th of this month, would administration have the flexibility to implement the rest of everything that happens after the board says yes with 4 or more votes, sending it out to the municipality and then through Deed?
That really depends on the extent of the changes that are made. If that gives me 2 days to turn a budget around and get it to the city, and you've made substantial changes to, say, class size or something, we have to touch a whole lot of line items, then it'd be risky to get it to them on that first Monday in March. Because we'd have to redo our budget, redo all the narratives, redo that executive summary. It just takes quite a bit of time to do that. A couple more days would certainly be beneficial if we could have it.
Follow up, Madam President.
You share why you think this might be, why would you want us to do this?
So, I want to clarify first, if I might just follow up before I lose the trail. When you say a couple more days, can we say literally the 25th? Or would we want a couple more business days?
What's the 25th? Is that
Monday?
I think if we had it on the 25th, then potentially that would give us enough time. But 2 days.
Monday's the 26th. The 26th? Monday's the 26th, Tuesday's the 27th.
So if I might, Madam President, just the reason behind the thinking, the legislature today, portions of the legislature at a press conference indicated that SB 140, which is the primary vehicle of discussion for a BSA increase, at this point, the legislative session is still being negotiated using their terminology, and there is a hard stop, at which point the legislature has to make a decision on at least the broadband portion of that bill for federal requirements. And so I'm wondering if we have additional wiggle room to push back our decision by a couple more days so this board has as much information as we can about what Trudeau intends to do. I think there's a world where a decision is made on SB 140, where at one time rural broadband internet, education funding are addressed, and then there's also a world potentially separately where the legislature could just deal with rural broadband internet by itself and then wait till the end of session, and which would result in school districts like ASD across the state having to have these difficult conversations. And we're typically the first or among the first. I know Fairbanks is beginning their conversation now, and we're just a few weeks ahead. So if you had to suggest or if administration were to suggest a date for us to push back our second meeting this month, what would that look like?
I guess if I had to make my preference known on it, would be able to keep the 20th, and then in the event that we get additional funding, potentially call a special meeting after that to see if we can address it based on the timing of it. That might be a better alternative, and then just make a quick revision depending on the time and then do it. The other thing to consideration is the governor does have veto power. So if we have to wait until the governor actually signs this bill, that could potentially push it even further.
Yep. If I might,
Follow up?
Yeah, I'll add an item to the pile of consideration, which is just parents, students, and education professionals across Anchorage having to be yanked back and forth. So Madam President, I'll talk with you offline as to what our options look like. I don't think that the chair of our body, I think according to our bylaws, has the purview to set and reschedule meetings. So if anything makes sense, we can do it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have,
I did put it on. I just wanted to chime in. My fingers are crossed for the legislature coming together and increasing funding, but I do want to manage the community's expectation where SB 140 was initially referring to $300 BSA increase, which would put us at a projected $76 million structural deficit. So to be completely realistic, if there were a $300 BSA increase, I wouldn't necessarily expect there to be another BSA increase in future fiscal years. So we may need to produce more structural reductions, not less, even if there is a BSA increase. So maybe I'm just being negative, Nancy, but I'm seriously concerned about our revenues.
Thank you. Other comments? Member, oh, no, I thought you were turning on your mic. Member Donovan?
Okay, do you ask questions about?
Absolutely.
On the staffing for the various staff allocations. We know our Title I schools have extra money and spend that sometimes for additional staff that they need. But with that as an exception, just from general funds, not Title I dollars,
Are there any exceptions to the elementary staff allocations chart here? Any schools getting additional staff?
I'll have to go back and check. I think there's a halftime at Inlet View and a halftime at Willow that have been in the budget for years. Or since the IB program came online. At Inlet View anyway.
Thank you.
Other questions? Member Lessons.
I appreciate that question. Appendix F has the FTE, the teacher FTE, which, if I'm reading it correctly, will show us how many FTE each school is generally losing. That's correct?
That's, yeah, just
okay.
Regard to the teaching staff.
There are a couple of schools that look like they're holding steady, and I just wonder if you could touch on that. I don't see a whole lot of increases. Maybe there's one, but there are a couple of schools where there don't seem to be any changes. And is that because their enrollment is going up enough to offset the PTR reduction?
Yes, that's exactly what happens.
Okay. And I had one other question. Oh, it's Appendix F at the back of the budget.
And that schedule is created because we had, it includes the ESSER funded teachers. So in FY24, we had at high schools 13 FTE funded through ESSER money that came into the general fund, and then 6 FTE at all the comprehensive middle schools. So just to do a comparative basis to see what the actual change is going to be, we included that schedule.
And then I just wanted to say, I've been talking and asking a lot, but I went and I tried to cost out the board's budget guidance document, just to help me understand what we had asked the administration to do. And we didn't close the gap. We left $9 or $10 million of, I don't know. And I know that the administration did, and I commend you because that's a lot of work. And I wanted to just double down on your point about the risk. You've massively increased the attrition estimates. I mean, we're spending our savings down and we're increasing the attrition estimates to close the gap. I just think that we're going to be running on fumes. If there is an emergency, I don't know what we're going to do. Let's hope it's a small emergency. But I did appreciate all of the fine tooth combing that the administration has done. But I did have one question, and that was: the summer school enrichment, has that been reduced in the budget? I didn't ask about that earlier. Like
yes.
The secondary enrichment that's gone away, that's somewhere.
It's not gone away, but I think we reduced the number of courses they can take.
Okay, so there will be a small.
I believe so.
That's what I recall as well. Traditionally, kids have been able to sign up for up to 2 online classes for enrichment purposes in the summer. And I think the reduction that we contemplated was just allowing them to sign up for 1.
For 1, okay.
That's credit recovery. No?
No, the credit recovery would stay.
Okay.
Okay, I'll follow up to just sort of help me figure out where that is.
Madam President?
Oh, yes.
How much money does that save? Reducing from 2 to 1 for summer school?
I believe it was a few $100,000. It wasn't for the credit or for the enrichment fees. It wasn't a whole lot.
But the district pays for them to take. It used to be 2, now 1 class. Okay. Member Jacobs.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Speaking to the portion of our slideshow that talked about risk from Mr. Ratliff, had the board chose to recommend, I guess I'll back up just a half a step, and I appreciate Member Lesson's comments regarding this board not having consensus to solve the entire $98 million fiscal the budget gap. My first year on the board included us starting the process tonight, essentially. And so having any additional feedback, I think, has been valuable, and I think will result in a less contentious or or at least ad hoc budget adoption process later this month is my guess. With that said, had the board had consensus around dropping fund balance to 6% instead of 5%, were items identified for potential cuts or reductions that aren't on this board or a part of this budget?
To the president, no, sir, we don't have another list of items to continually cut. Kind of the whole point of us was to eliminate the need to increase class sizes as much as possible. So we were able to limit to 1 at 4 through 12. Likely, if we were going to cut another 6 million, that's going to go to class sizes.
I guess if I could just some closing comments as we wrap up, because poll probably isn't the right word, but I asked us to address this item tonight. I'll share that I'll echo board members who said that they found portions of this conversation alarming. I agree. We have members of the legislature, education advocates who are wandering the halls of Juneau today, indicating that we're not 100% sure that we as a state are meeting our constitutional mandate to adequately maintain a system of public education. That's kind of the backdrop we're having this conversation on. And again, we're the first board to have the conversation, as I understand it, but this conversation will be happening across Alaska as the legislative session continues. I deeply appreciate those who testified today. I deeply appreciate those who have reached out to their elected officials, and I think we need more of it because this isn't a one-year problem. Dr. Bryant was right to highlight that we were left with an apparent binary choice to keep or reduce or maintain one program when next year we'll be in a very much different situation for our students and families. So appreciate administration's work putting the presentation together, and I'm committed to working with the rest of my colleagues with navigating the rest of our budget process.
Thank you, Member Jacobs. Okay, so yes, and I think thank you guys for coming back for a round 2. Good information, and I don't know, I won't sleep at all tonight, but thank you very much. Moving on with our agenda. We are now at the superintendent's update.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll need to be brief tonight. My allergies are killing me. I'm losing my voice. And to be frank, I will need every ounce of my voice for the next 3 days as I fly to Juneau to loudly and unabashedly advocate for a $13 increase to the base student allocation. It is not acceptable that my colleagues in other parts of Alaska have to debate the merits of heat versus teachers. That's not who we aspire to be as a state, and that's not what we have to be if we can come together and figure out a way to sensibly fund our schools. We have difficult decisions here in ASD, and as I shared earlier today, it gave me great pain to present this budget to the board because it entails a number of things that were just talked about, including increasing our risk as a district, spending down fund balance to 5%, which puts us in a number of risky situations. But I will say that we worked very hard over the past couple of weeks to avoid massive layoffs. This situation could have resulted in laying off up to 1,000 staff members across all areas of the organization. We did our best to keep the board's goals and guardrails in mind by holding harmless our K-3 PTR. It was just last year that we had to raise PTR, the pupil to teacher ratio, by 1 for grades K through 12. And we figured out a way to hold K through 3 harmless while we figure out what we need to do to convince more legislators to invest in the base student allocation. We heard the board loud and clear that we need to protect our school counselors. We need to protect school security personnel. We need to prioritize credit recovery. We need to work towards our ambitious goals, which is even in the same breath that we need to talk about eliminating programs such as Ignite, we also need to talk about ways to move our academic mission forward by thinking about programs like STEAM. But this isn't easy, and I want to say it again. I'm a broken record, but I need to say these types of things 1,000 times, where 70% of the $90 million deficit is fund balance. So all of the deliberation, all of the discussion, all of the great emails and testimony that we've received have been about a reduction of about $25 million. If nothing changed, if there continues to be political indifference towards investing in public education, we need to figure out what that's going to look like in the magnitude of 75 million plus. And that will be devastating. There will be no program that will not be on the table because we simply need to prioritize the core of a school building, which are the educators in our classroom and ideally the buses to get them to the school. But this is bare bones. The analogy proposed earlier was around, cutting down the fat. The fat is gone. We've torn in the muscle and will continue to do that if something doesn't give. So on behalf of all of my superintendent colleagues across the state, I'm in this. I will be in Juneau tomorrow with what little voice I have to advocate for 1413 because the stakes are just too high. And I never want one of my colleagues to have to think about the merits of heat versus teachers, especially when there's so many bigger issues that we need to think about, like diversifying our economy. We need to think about teacher housing. We need to think about structural ways to make Alaska the destination state. So I really call upon our legislators to listen to what we've talked about today very closely. And if you didn't listen tonight, I will let you know what we talked about tomorrow when I'm there, because this is serious and this period of indifference needs to stop. I've heard some alarming things. Leaders, people who I respect, saying things like, districts just always say the sky is falling. They try to characterize conversations like this as though we're in an episode of Chicken Little. This is not an episode of Chicken Little. If anything, this is more like the movie Don't Look Up, because some people don't want us to look up at the reality, which is that public education is at stake, and we need every single voice and stakeholder here at the table to advocate for what's right, which is the future of Alaskans. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bryant. And we will be praying for you and when you leave for Juneau, for sure. And if you need us, just call. We'll be there. Questions for the superintendent? Comment? So if there are no questions, we're going to move on to our board member comments. Who wants to volunteer to go first? Okay, then I will just pick Member Donnelly. Why don't you go first?
I was looking for some budget guidance and I found this quote from Milton Friedman. One of the great mistakes is to judge policy and programs by their intentions rather than their results. And then there's something that I just personally wanted to say, and others have said it, but I think it really bears and deserves repeating. All it takes for the war in Gaza at the end is for the Hamas terrorists to surrender. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Donnelly. Member Jacobs.
No comments tonight, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Higgins.
I know you were kind of hoping I'd join.
Really wasn't. I'm really happy to
Not going to
hear
happen
from you tonight.
I'll first of all start off like I always do, just appreciation for the comments that the speakers came forward with. They're advocating for things they care about kids for. They see that from an educational standpoint, the outcomes, and I appreciate the effort they're making to try to advocate for that. In regards to the budget, the changes we look at, I'm a Myers-Briggs 65T, which means I like logical decisions. I got the same score as Spock because that's the maximum. And so when I see things such as STEAM or sixth grade or other things, I want to look at data that substantiates the decision is logical and is best for the kids. So I'm going to have questions in regards to both of those, but I do want to say, first of all, I like change. We've got to do something different if we want to get better results. And so I'm not advocating to the status quo. I certainly wouldn't want to do that. I just want to make sure that we have, because I don't think we're going to be trying anything that hasn't been tried already. Okay. I just don't think that's going to happen. And I do see the scholastic studies in some of these items. So I think that's a big issue. When it comes to the budget, if we're going to make a change in the budget, we have a legislature that has completely avoided trying to generate a long-term fiscal plan because it's going to have to deal with a revenue stream and they don't want to go there politically. They think that's safe. And it's going to be the voters that decide whether that's safe to go ahead and to continually underfund education. Great Alaska Schools, when it became very active and people kept calling the legislature emails and telling them, you work for us, this is what we want you to do. It made a difference that year on the base student allocation. If you're going to care about kids, if you're going to care about education, this is the year to speak out. You need to let your legislators who work for you what you want them to do. And we work for you and you're coming in here and I appreciate that, sharing with us what's going on. But this would be an academic study if we don't get the voices out there to the legislature and tell them what we want. And so we need the public to have a voice. We need the public to be clear on their expectations and let them know what you want, because this is going to continue unless we become more vocal. And it takes it coming from the voters, not just elected officials. It needs to come from the voters and it needs to be a loud voice to make a difference. And then this will be more academic and we can look at it. Some of the changes we're looking at making changes, they might be good changes anyway, because it gives us funding for other things. I like change. I don't have a problem with that. But I think we've got a real crisis there. And the extension of the superintendent's contracts, I appreciate what he's stepped into a real challenging situation. I acknowledge that. When I get on the board 2.5 years ago, it was 74% of staff saying they had no trust in the administration. I believe that has been dramatically changed, and the communications are different. That is critical to be able to get teams to work together, and I appreciate that. If there's one area that would stand out with that, that's it. We had some tough issues, whether it's the family school partnership, but that was in clear violations, whether it's the change in start time, never easy. Whether it's other changes out there, at least we're going forward trying to look for improvement and we're engaging with the staff. So my appreciation and congratulations on the extension. It's well deserved, and we need to continue on in that direction. So be a voice out there to the legislature. You want to get funding. They've got to have a revenue stream, a long-term fiscal plan. They haven't done it. It's critical. And if they're not going to do it, if the public is not demanding it, and it needs to come in loud and strong. It doesn't take that much to send out emails to the legislature. It doesn't take that much to make a phone call. And I guarantee they get frustrated when they hear from people what they want to do when they don't want to do anything. And that's what it's going to take. So I hope this was an academic exercise for the budget and that we don't have to do some things that are not good for kids. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pack. Closing comments?
Well, I keep on thinking about Governor Dunleavy's State of the State. And one thing that stuck out to me is instead of no to the future, we become no to the future. And I think that as much as we need economic opportunities, we need educational opportunities, because without education, we really don't have a sustainable future. And right now we're saying no to a lot of things, and it's almost like a choice that we don't have. But the legislation is a way to change things, and I'm really praying that things are moving. Juno.
Thank you very much. We just love you. Thank you so much. Member Holloman.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the superintendent's comments. I came into this profession about 25 years ago as something I wanted to do in a way to make a living. And like most teachers, I don't think it ever occurred to me that we would have to fight for the profession, not simply a program we liked or something along those lines, but that if you wanted public education to succeed, you had to get in a battle. And it used to kind of be a battle every year, but now it just seems like a battle that's going on all of the time. I would urge the folks that contacted us about programs that have value to contact your legislators. That's really where the solution is at. I would urge you not simply to ask them for a number, but to explain what it is you see that is of value, because the message that we're being given is that public education is a failure. To be sure, we fail every day. We've got over 40,000 kids in our district. Doesn't go well every time, but we also succeed every day. And the successes and failures are sitting right next to each other. Same teachers, same programs, same buildings. The solution has always seemed to me that you keep doing what is working for the students that are succeeding, and you figure out what you can do differently for the ones that are not. Not that we do the same thing for all students. We do the right thing for each group of students. And unfortunately, as you get down into the more and more difficult students to work with, it gets more consumptive and expensive. These different programs make a difference to certain kids. Activities make a huge difference to a big chunk of kids. It's why we value them, even though it doesn't directly address education. Career coaches make a difference. Business counselors make a difference. Electives make a difference. Choir makes a difference. The immersion program binds families to the Anchorage School District in a way that is really hard to imagine unless you actually talk to families that will explain to you that they bought houses in their house in a certain neighborhood. They delayed leaving Anchorage, or they chose Anchorage because we have this program in our schools, and it's not something many places do. All of these things have value, but we're up against some people who frankly want public education to fail. It's not simply about allocation of dollars, although allocation of dollars is part of it. There are people that want it to fail. There used to be thousands of people that paid their own way to Alaska to stand in line and be turned down for a teaching job about the time I started. That doesn't happen anymore. We now have to fly people out of state to try to sign up 5 or 6 people to come to Anchorage and take positions. We're taking people that aren't certified and trying to help them get through school in order to fill positions. Where before, if you didn't have all your paperwork in a row, there was no point in coming to the building and filling out an application because they didn't have time to deal with you. They had thousands of people that had already been screened, that had everything ready. So in a lot of ways, the profession has been severely eroded in ways that aren't apparent to families. It's all in the background. But as that erosion continues, we're going to have trouble running a good district, even if we had the funding. And we don't have the funding. So lots of people are looking at this profession now and choosing something different because the future is very unclear. It's not just unstable anymore. For years and years and years, teachers worried about layoffs almost every year. Nobody worries about being laid off anymore. There's no one to replace them. We can cut 100 positions, and we don't expect anybody to be laid off unless they're in some really unique, isolated category that makes them unfit for general ed programs. And there aren't many people like that, simply because we never staffed up to begin with. We were never able to hire as many people as we meant to. And more people are going to leave this district this year than we can find to replace them. So in some ways, those staffing cuts are almost going to happen even if we get the money. That's the problem we should be working on, and we can't even get to that. So it really is, I think, a much more critical thing than it's ever been before, than I've ever witnessed in my time in public education. I know that lots of people in Anchorage do support us, but at the same time, they're busy living their lives and haranguing the legislature. It's not a great hobby. It's it's not fulfilling. It's not rewarding. It just is something that has to be done if we're going to keep it going. But I would love for all these cuts to go away and for us to continue doing everything that works and be thinking of more things that work, more things that engage kids, more things that make kids want to be at school every day. Those are the problems that a successful district would be wrestling with, and we don't even get to think along those lines anymore. So I do turn to the public and ask for your support. We ask for your criticism too. We need it. We need to know what we're doing wrong when we're doing things wrong, and we need the resources to do it right if we can. But thank you to everybody that came tonight, everybody that's written. Please don't quiet your voice. Talk to your neighbors. There will be constituent meetings from your legislators if you're not sure who they are. akleg.gov has a little thing at the bottom where you stick your address in and find out exactly who represents you. Know their names. Some of them will be coming around knocking on your door this summer, wanting to be reelected, and ask them how they voted on these things and what they did. It's a great time to engage them and let them know what their constituents think. They are responsive to that. So it unfortunately is going to be a long slog, and this is going to have unfortunate results unless something truly dramatic changes in the next couple of months. And my experience is that's very unlikely, but it's not over, and we can change things for next year and the years after if we try hard enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Lessons.
I appreciate all the previous comments and a really thoughtful afternoon, evening of discussion and hard work. There is a finance committee meeting on Thursday, the 15th. It occurred to me that if other committee members are interested or other board members are interested, we could extend that if that would be helpful, whether a little bit longer, 30 minutes or another extra hour, I don't know. Just as another opportunity for discussion. So I can connect with President Bellamy to see if that's going to be a useful adjustment. I really did enjoy the chance to visit with the Betty Davis East Thunderbots, the robotics club. There were maybe, I don't know, 18 or 20 students, and some of them brand new to robotics. They were working together beautifully. They spoke about their motto, gracious professionalism, and I think they embodied it. They each had a set of different roles, whether it was coding or 3D printing or assembling things or doing things that I can't remember. But they were collaborative, they were communicating, they were engaged, they were so enthusiastic. And I want to say they said they were like 17th in the world in this contest. And there are thousands and thousands of teams around the world competing in this first robotics competition. There are also teams in Diamond and West, I think. Might have gotten that wrong. But it's just a great program, great kids, and a joy to be invited to come visit. So if y'all get a chance to go visit them, take a few minutes out of your time. I'll pause them.
Thank you. Member Wilson, do you have any comments tonight?
I do. Thank you. This is really difficult conversations that we're having. It's really, really painful to look at where we need to cut in order to balance our budget while having the same conversations about continuing to push forward to prepare our youth for college, career, and life readiness. And I'll continue to voice that our K-12 schools are our workforce development. They are the future of our city and our state. So an investment in our youth is truly the investment that needs to be made. Excuse me. I also wanted to give a community engagement update because it's been a really busy month for community engagement for ASD. This past weekend, they attended the 9th annual Black Business Expo and Summit. And this weekend, will be the African American Summit at Betty Davis East High School from 9 to 5 on Saturday, and the Alternative Schools Fair at Baggage from 12 to 4. So very busy weekend, which will feature an information session on the lottery from 12:15 to 1. And during our next communications team meeting on February 15th, a new draft proposal for the superintendent's committees, the MECAC, Native Advisory Committee meetings, and Special Education Advisory Committees to provide committee updates at future board meetings will be proposed. And lastly, the Parent and Family Engagement Team has launched the Parent Family Survey for feedback on the selection of the academies of Anchorage. And the survey will be open until February 29th, and incentives are available. So please participate in that survey. Thank you.
And thank you very much. The next communication meeting, Member Wilson?
That is February 15th.
2:30?
Thank you.
Thank you. So I just have a couple of, we have all of our meetings on the same day. So we start with governance, then finance, then communication. So I want to appreciate.
I just want Chairman. Did the for governance? Did the time? What's the current planned time for the governance committee?
2:30.
We were the last committee to move to be on the same day as the others. So it was a choice of either before or after. I don't get up that early.
So communications is not going to be at 2:30.
That's correct. My error.
Okay.
12 to 1, that might change because member lessons might have a long agenda. So we'll talk about that. But finance is 12 to 1. Right now we have communications at 1:15 to 2:15. And then we have governance from 2:30 to 3:30. So that is what the schedule is right now. We'll let you know if that should need to be tweaked. So I do want to thank everyone that testified tonight. I want to thank board members for your thoughtful comments. I really want to thank the staff for all the work, all the questions, all the interruptions to your day. It doesn't go unnoticed. We appreciate it. I really don't know how you get to do the job you were hired to do and then serve us as well, but we appreciate it. I want kudos for the digital newsletter that came out this week, and I'm making it public announcement right now. I will no longer need to do a my little monthly community federation report to the Federation of Community Councils, because I'll just send them the digital newsletter, and after each meeting I'll send them the recap. So I do thank communications for those two tools. They make my life easier. Board members, if you need help or would like someone to join you to talk about the bond, please see America to sign up. If you would like to sign up, if you need help. If you don't need help, then proceed as you'd like. I would like to encourage board members to consider sharing what's happening in your community councils, because they don't. I do go to the Federation of Community Council meetings, but they don't have a whole lot of time to share what's happening with their. Let me put it this way: I can't stay on the line because I have another council. So I can't hear what's going on with the other community councils. So if somehow we can just infuse in your comments at the end of the night, just infuse a little bit about what's happening. Not every council, but whatever kind of strikes you as being important. Member Lessons and I will be going to Juneau with 4 amazing students this weekend, and we'll be there until Tuesday. You already know what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about all the stuff we talked about tonight, the impact, what is going to happen to the Anchorage School District without adequate funding. And I did hear some encouraging comments today when I listened to the press conference for the Senate majority. And they're having, and actually tomorrow is a special presentation on the charter school. Was that Harvard? I can't remember who did the charter school.
It's a study from.
It's a study. So they're going to really dig into that study, which kind of elevated charter schools over public schools in some study. So, which has apparently excited some people. So I will be listening in on that tomorrow as well. We already, I think Dora reminded everybody about the Betty Davis community event. That's on Saturday. But on Friday evening from 5 to 9, we have a youth leadership event looking at youth civic engagement. That will be at Betty Davis East Anchorage High School, 5 to 9. A special screening of the movie The Body Politic. And that will, the producer, director of that documentary will be available to have conversations, a panel discussion, and lots of food and door prizes that goes along with it. Now, I'll be in Juneau, but it should be a very, we have gotten information out to our students, and I'm hoping that students will find that it's a little different this year. Instead of taking kids out of class, we moved it to an evening, hoping that, we could still get a good showing. Betty Davis, as you know, was a school board member, former senator, often called the conscience of the legislature. Her legacy lives on in that she worked to always empower and advocate for youth and education. So with that, I think, I was in DC last week as part of the Association of Alaska School Board advocacy team. And we were the same situations that we are dealing with within our state are reflected in the national priorities for the National School Board Association. We had equity conference really immediately followed by the Advocacy Institute. And I will be sharing more of that, the information. I've shared some with several staff members, but I will be sharing more information with the board. So that's it for me. Anybody else have any final comments? All right, I will accept the motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourn. Second.
Moved in second to adjourn. Any opposition? Oh, look at y'all getting out before. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.